It was one of those days that seemed designed to break your spirit slowly, like a torturous symphony of dull, repetitive notes. Lin Ji, 25 years old, sat at her desk in the office, staring at a computer screen that might as well have been a piece of driftwood floating aimlessly on the sea of her disinterest. The morning meeting was dragging on. Her boss, an overzealous middle manager who clearly had no idea what he was talking about, was rambling on about something: synergy? Cross-departmental collaboration? Lin Ji couldn't care less. She was focused on the far more important task of deciding if she could get away with sneaking a nap without anyone noticing. The meeting room was sterile, with flickering fluorescent lights overhead. The walls, painted the color of bland oatmeal, only served to emphasize how dull the conversation had become. As Lin Ji rested her chin on her palm, half listening and half dreaming of escaping to somewhere more interesting, she noticed something odd. A sudden chill swept through the room, and the air seemed to shimmer for a second. At first, Lin Ji thought it was just her imagination, maybe a trick of the light or the air conditioning malfunctioning again. But then, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the walls, a sound she couldn't quite place, and then, the conference room door exploded open with a sudden gust of wind. Lin Ji nearly jumped out of her seat, but it wasn't the wind that startled her. No, it was the man who had just walked through it. He was tall, dressed in an absurdly ornate outfit, black armor with shining, golden accents, a long red cape swirling behind him like something out of an old fantasy movie. He carried a sword that looked like it could slice a skyscraper in half with a single swing. The man had sharp features, glowing blue eyes, and a posture that screamed, "I'm the hero of this story." If this was some kind of office prank, Lin Ji wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. The room went silent. All eyes were on the man, who dramatically raised his sword to point at her. "You," he boomed, his voice deep and commanding, but strangely echoey as if it had traveled through some unseen void. "You are the one I seek. The chosen one, the eternal queen who shall save this world from the impending dimensional war." The others in the room blinked, unsure whether this was a new marketing stunt or some elaborate team-building exercise. Lin Ji, however, had had enough of nonsense. She blinked once, then looked at him with deadpan seriousness. She wasn't going to let her company's quarterly review be interrupted by some wannabe hero spouting nonsense. "Yeah, no. You've got the wrong person," she said, sipping from her half-empty coffee mug, unperturbed. "I'm just here to do the TPS reports." The man's face tightened in confusion, clearly expecting more awe and reverence. "But, the prophecy. The multiverse itself hinges on your power." "Only you." "Sorry, but I'm really not interested," Lin Ji interrupted, waving him off. "If you could just take that sword somewhere else, that'd be great. You're kind of blocking the projector, and I can't see the slides." She glanced at her colleagues. "Am I the only one who finds this awkward?" Before anyone could respond, the man glared at her, his eyes narrowing. "Then you leave me no choice." "I shall." Lin Ji, without missing a beat, threw her coffee at him. The mug, now empty except for a few sad dregs of lukewarm caffeine, hit him square in the chest. The warrior staggered back, his glowing sword flickering in a weird, glitchy fashion, as though the coffee had short-circuited him. The warrior let out a strange sound, almost like a mix between a gasp and a glitchy error message. "Did you just freeze me?" he asked, voice faltering. For a brief moment, he didn't look so much like a hero as he did a malfunctioning robot. Lin Ji blinked, as confused as anyone else. I guess," she said, shrugging. There was an awkward silence in the room. The warrior stood there, frozen in place, like a character paused on a video game screen. Lin Ji took another sip of her coffee, trying to process the absurdity of it all. Finally, the man glitched once more, his form flickering like a bad connection, before disappearing altogether, leaving behind only the faint smell of burnt coffee. "Well, that was weird," Lin Ji muttered, wiping her hands on her pants as if nothing had happened. She looked at her colleagues, who were still staring at the spot where the warrior had stood. "Anyone else want to go for lunch? I'm feeling Chinese." No one responded immediately. Instead, they slowly turned to face Lin Ji as though seeing her for the first time. After what felt like an eternity, one of her colleagues, a slightly frazzled-looking woman named Mei, spoke up, Lin Ji? What just happened? I don't know. You tell me. Lin Ji raised an eyebrow, keeping the tone light. 1 minute, I'm in a meeting about synergies, and the next, some guy with a sword appears in the doorway like he's auditioning for Lord of the Rings. I think he was serious, Mei said, slowly shaking her head. He said something about a dimensional war. Lin Ji nodded slowly. Yeah, sure. Why not? Sounds like a Tuesday. The whole room sat in stunned silence. Then, after a beat, Lin Ji sighed and stood up. All right, that's it. I'm going to get lunch. Someone else can handle whatever that was. She made her way to the door, but as she did, she felt a faint ripple in the air around her. A brief flash of light shimmered on the edges of her vision, but when she turned to look, nothing was there. The next few days were a strange blur of bizarre events. Lin Ji's phone started blowing up with texts and emails, all claiming to be from dimensions beyond her own, offering cryptic messages about her supposed destiny. Every time she answered a call, some strange voice, sounding like it had been recorded through a tin can, would tell her about the coming dimensional war, and how she, Lin Ji, had been chosen to end it first. Lin Ji was baffled. Then she just got annoyed. She wasn't even a fan of fantasy novels, let alone being part of one. She had enough problems dealing with customer service, let alone saving multiple worlds from destruction. One morning, just as she was contemplating calling in sick to avoid another one of these strange invasions, a new visitor arrived, this time in the form of a woman, dressed in flowing robes, with a staff that hummed with crackling energy. She appeared in the middle of Lin Ji's living room, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Greetings, chosen one, the woman said, her voice calm and steady. I have come to aid you in your quest. Lin Ji stared at her, blinking. Quest? I'm sorry, but this isn't a quest, this is an office job with no pay raise. What's next? You want me to slay a dragon? Solve a riddle? The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. You must understand, you hold the key to stopping the dimensional war. With your power, you can rewrite the rules of reality. Lin Ji sighed. She was about to ask if the woman had any idea how ridiculous she sounded, but then, something happened. The world around her rippled, as if reality itself was bending under the pressure of this strange visitor. It was like the space between them stretched and distorted, until everything looked slightly off. Okay, Lin Ji said slowly, so now I'm feeling like I'm in one of those weird sci-fi shows. Is this where I get some superpower or whatever? The woman nodded. Indeed. You have the ability to absorb knowledge and power from other dimensions. It is what makes you a pivotal figure in this war. Lin Ji took a deep breath. Great. Just what I need. More dimensions to deal with. She looked at the woman, then at the crackling energy around her. Well, if I'm stuck with this, I guess I'll have to learn how to adapt. Whatever that means. The woman's lips twitched upward. That is exactly what you must do. And with that, Lin Ji's reluctant journey into the heart of the dimensional war began. Lin Ji had always prided herself on being a practical person. She didn't believe in magic, and she definitely didn't believe in prophecies. So when the woman in front of her told her she could absorb powers from other dimensions, Lin Ji's first instinct was to roll her eyes. The woman, who looked like she stepped out of a history book, was clearly delusional. I'm sorry, Lin Ji said, adjusting her glasses with exaggerated care, but are you telling me I can just absorb knowledge from other worlds? The woman nodded gravely. Yes. And with that knowledge comes the power to evolve. To adapt. To defeat the invaders from other dimensions and stop the war. Lin Ji glanced around her apartment, as if looking for hidden cameras. This had to be some sort of prank. Okay, she said slowly, her tone laced with disbelief. And I'm the chosen one who's supposed to save the multiverse? Is this like one of those chosen hero tropes? I'm guessing next you'll tell me I have a magical artifact hidden in my closet that'll grant me even more power. Actually, the woman replied, unfazed, you already have the artifact. That got Lin Ji's attention. She raised an eyebrow. Where? Is it in a hidden compartment in my coffee table? Or maybe inside my sock drawer? The woman smiled slightly and held up her staff. It crackled with a strange energy, and for a brief second, Lin Ji thought she saw something glowing in the air, something that wasn't quite there but should have been. Then, as if the universe itself was stretching to accommodate the woman's presence, a low hum filled the room, and a door appeared in the wall, a door that had definitely not been there before. It shimmered like a thin veil between realities, pulsing with the same energy the woman carried. Lin Ji took a step back, her heart rate quickening. Okay, this is starting to feel a lot less like a bad sci-fi movie and more like a really bad sci-fi nightmare. The woman didn't respond. She simply stepped forward and pushed the door open. Lin Ji hesitated for a moment before following, curiosity outweighing her hesitation. On the other side of the door, the room she entered wasn't her apartment anymore. It was another world. Or, perhaps, a piece of it. The air was thick with an iridescent glow, the walls made of strange materials that shifted between metallic and organic. There were symbols floating in the air, glowing lines of ancient text that seemed to hum with power. It was like stepping into a different dimension entirely. Welcome to the dimensional nexus, the woman said, her voice echoing softly in the vast space. This is where all worlds converge. Lin Ji felt a strange pull in her chest, as though something inside her was recognizing this place. It wasn't just her mind that was being affected, it was her very being. As if, deep down, she knew she wasn't just standing in some empty space. She was standing at the center of everything. The woman raised her staff and gestured toward a floating platform in the middle of the room. This is where you will begin your training. To unlock the full potential of your powers, you must first understand them. Lin Ji was still skeptical but willing to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was something more to this than some elaborate con. She stepped onto the platform, feeling a faint buzz beneath her feet. The moment she did, a wave of warmth surged through her, like a million voices whispering in languages she couldn't understand. Images from different worlds, different times, rushed into her mind. A battle between warriors with swords made of light. A planet surrounded by storms of fire. A high-tech city in the middle of an eternal night. Her head swam. What is this? She gasped, clutching her temples as the visions accelerated, faster and faster. This is the beginning of your evolution, the woman said. The knowledge from every dimension is yours to absorb. You must learn to harness it. Lin Ji gritted her teeth, struggling to maintain control as her mind buckled under the weight of all the information flooding into her. But then, just as she thought she might collapse under the pressure, the flood of vision ceased. Her breathing slowed, and her body relaxed. The sensation of being filled with everything slowly receded. See, the woman said, her voice calm now. You've already begun. You've absorbed knowledge from several dimensions. Now you must learn to channel it, to adapt. Lin Ji looked down at her hands, feeling different, more than she had before. Something inside her had changed. She felt stronger. The feeling was subtle at first, but it was there. The woman was right. She had gained something. And whether she liked it or not, she could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Okay, Lin Ji muttered, wiping her forehead. So I've absorbed some knowledge. But how exactly am I supposed to channel it? This isn't exactly the kind of skill you can use to impress people at a party. The woman smiled. You will learn. But first, there are other invaders to deal with. The dimensional overlord's forces are already gathering. Lin Ji's pulse quickened. Who? The dimensional overlord is the one who threatens all worlds. His army is vast, spanning across countless realities. He wishes to dominate every dimension and merge them into a single reality under his rule. Lin Ji shook her head in disbelief. Okay, I thought I was getting involved in some interdimensional light work, but this sounds like the plot of every bad action movie I've ever seen. The fate of the multiverse is in your hands, the woman said, her tone more serious now. You must stop him before he can merge the dimensions and destroy everything. Lin Ji let out a deep breath. Fine. Fine. But I'm going to need a coffee first. The woman didn't laugh. Instead, she nodded, as if Lin Ji's response was exactly what she had expected. You'll need more than coffee, Lin Ji. You will need to evolve. To adapt. I get it, Lin Ji grumbled. But you're not giving me a lot to work with here. I mean, can we at least get a demonstration of these powers? You know, before I accidentally break the entire timeline? The woman extended her hand toward her, and with a subtle gesture, the air around them shifted. Suddenly, a large, shimmering sword materialized in Lin Ji's hands. It was made of pure light, its blade glowing with an ethereal energy. Lin Ji blinked. That's a sword. A sword of light, the woman corrected. It is an extension of your evolving abilities. You can use it to defend yourself or to attack when necessary. But remember, power is not always about destruction. It is about balance. Balance? Lin Ji echoed. Okay, now I'm definitely in an action movie. The woman nodded. There is a war coming, and with it, challenges you have never faced. But you will face them. You will adapt. Lin Ji stared at the sword for a long moment, feeling the weight of it in her hands. She felt a strange sensation, like the sword was alive, its energy flowing into her. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation. She could feel something, like an instinct awakening inside her, pushing her to understand the sword's purpose. The hum of energy in the air increased as she grasped it firmly. She swung the sword experimentally, and to her surprise, it moved effortlessly. The blade sliced through the air with a sharp, resonating sound, cutting through the tension in the room. Not bad, she muttered, her lips curving into a half-smile. Maybe this whole chosen one thing won't be so bad after all. But the woman was already turning toward the exit. It is only the beginning, she said. The true test is yet to come. Lin Ji followed her, still holding the sword. For a moment, the weight of everything started to settle in. She wasn't just dealing with office drama anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And if what the woman said was true, Lin Ji had a lot to learn, about power, about balance, and about herself. As they walked toward the shimmering portal that would take them back to her world, Lin Ji couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, how was she supposed to stop the most powerful being across all dimensions? The answer, she realized, was simple: she was going to have to figure it out. One weird, absurd step at a time. The portal shimmered again as Lin Ji stepped through it, back into her apartment. The sudden transition from the strange Nexus world to her quiet, familiar living room felt like a jarring collision of realities. For a moment, she just stood there, blinking in the dim light of her apartment, her senses still adjusting to the chaos of everything she'd just learned. The sword of light was still in her hand, pulsing with an energy she wasn't sure how to control. She held it awkwardly for a second before she set it down on the coffee table. It was unnerving to think that, just a few hours ago, she had been complaining about spreadsheets and office politics. Now, she was involved in a war across dimensions, wielding weapons of light and knowledge from other worlds. All right, she muttered, pacing the small space, let's think this through. I'm the chosen one. Apparently. And I'm supposed to stop a war between all of reality's dimensions. That makes sense. She threw herself onto the couch, the weight of the sword now resting next to her. Her apartment, with its mismatched furniture and cluttered coffee table, felt so mundane now that she could barely wrap her mind around it. The world outside, hell, the whole universe outside, was on the verge of collapse, and she had no idea how to begin fixing it. She picked up her phone. Nothing. No new messages. No cryptic warnings from otherworldly entities. She stared at the screen for a moment and sighed. If she were going to do this, she had to take it seriously. The doorbell rang. Really? Lin Ji groaned under her breath, slumping in the couch like a defeated piece of furniture. Who the hell? She dragged herself up to answer the door. Maybe it was a package. Maybe it was another strange visitor, come to add even more nonsense to her day. When she opened it, she froze. Standing in her doorway was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a suit that looked more appropriate for a fantasy warrior than anything corporate. He wore a strange armor that shimmered in the light, a dark hood partially obscuring his face. But what really stopped Lin Ji was the aura of quiet power he radiated, the sense that he wasn't just a visitor, he was a force to be reckoned with. Are you Lin Ji? He asked, his voice low and commanding, but tinged with something oddly familiar. As though he had known her all her life. Yeah, she said, not bothering to hide the incredulity in her tone. Who are you? My name is Kale, he said. I've come to train you. She raised an eyebrow. Train me? For what? I already have a sword. Is this some sort of unwanted hero boot camp? I understand your skepticism, Kale said, stepping into the apartment without invitation, but time is short, and we do not have the luxury of explanations. Excuse me, but I think you're in the wrong place, Lin Ji replied, crossing her arms over her chest. This is my apartment. And right now, I'm just trying to, figure things out. Kale didn't seem fazed. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see through her, like he understood more about her than she did. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small orb of glowing energy, a deep purple that seemed to swirl with life. You need to understand your power, Kale said, holding it out. This is a fragment of the dimensional core. You'll use it to unlock the next phase of your abilities. Lin Ji stared at the orb, unsure whether to be more curious or terrified. You're telling me this little thing is supposed to help me save the multiverse? She shook her head. No offense, but I'm not sure I even want to save the multiverse. I was just trying to get through the workday. Then you will fail, Kale said, his voice stern. You are the last hope for every world. If you do not rise to the challenge, they will fall. And with them, the fabric of reality itself will collapse. There is no other choice, Lin Ji. She stared at the orb in his hand. The glow it emitted seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm, pulling at something deep inside her. Her mind flashed back to the moment in the Nexus, when she had absorbed the knowledge of countless worlds. What had she learned, exactly? What was it all for? Why me? Lin Ji asked, her voice quieter now. Why me? Kale gave her a somber look. Because you are the one who can evolve. The one who can adapt to every challenge, every enemy. You are more than human now. Lin Ji swallowed. She wasn't sure if she was ready for any of this. She wasn't sure if she was capable of being ready. But as Kale stood there, holding the orb, something inside her stirred. That feeling, the sense that something had shifted within her, was still there. Maybe, just maybe, she could do something with it. Maybe she could learn to wield this power, however strange and chaotic it was. She reached out and took the orb from Kale's hand. A surge of energy flooded through her. It was like every nerve in her body was being lit up from the inside, and then, just like that, it stopped. The orb fell silent in her hand, but her body felt different. She could feel it now, something new, something sharp, something with purpose. I think I get it, she said, her voice steady for the first time since all of this began. I'm supposed to adapt. To evolve. But what happens after that? When I've figured this all out, what do I do? Just walk in and take down the dimensional overlord? Kale's lips curled into a faint smile. Not quite. You'll have to learn to fight. And to fight well. But first, you must begin with the basics. The first step is understanding how to use your new abilities. Lin Ji looked at him for a long moment, trying to shake off the lingering disbelief. She had spent her entire life in a world that made sense to her, a world with rules she could understand. But now, all of that was being shattered. This evolution of herself, it was all so foreign, but she had no choice. She couldn't run away from this. Not anymore. Not when the multiverse itself was at stake. All right, Lin Ji said, taking a deep breath. Let's do it. Train me. Show me what I need to know. Kale's expression hardened, and he nodded. Good. We don't have time to waste. Without warning, he raised his hand and a portal appeared in the corner of the room, a swirling vortex of light and shadow. Lin Ji didn't even flinch. The more she was exposed to this, the more it started to feel normal. A sense of dread gnawed at her, but a larger part of her felt excitement, the kind of excitement she hadn't felt since she was a child, playing video games, imagining she was the hero. She grabbed her sword, still resting on the coffee table. Her fingers brushed the cool surface of it, and she felt an odd connection. The sword was more than just an artifact now. It was part of her, an extension of the power she had absorbed from those other worlds. She stepped through the portal without hesitation. The world she entered this time was nothing like Earth. It was a wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling red storms, the air thick and hot with an unbearable pressure. In the distance, Lin Ji saw a massive fortress looming, its black spires piercing the crimson sky. This is where you will begin, Kale said, his voice steady and calm despite the hostile surroundings. You'll learn to focus your power here. To understand it. Lin Ji took in a deep breath. The air burned her lungs, but she didn't flinch. She could feel the sword in her hand humming softly, the power inside it resonating with the very energy of this place. What is this place? She asked, eyes narrowing as she scanned the wasteland. This is the Abyssal Training Ground, Kale replied. A place where you'll learn to face real challenges. Only then will you be ready to confront the true danger. Lin Ji nodded, tightening her grip on the sword. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she was starting to understand something crucial. If she didn't adapt, if she didn't evolve, she would fail. And everything would be lost. She looked toward the distant fortress, feeling an unfamiliar but undeniable resolve build inside her. Let's get started. And with that, Lin Ji stepped into the unknown.